Michael Keaton returning to play Batman / Bruce Wayne in the rumored Andy Muschietti Flash movie, which is going to be Flashpoint. Jake, your reaction to your favorite Batman. He's your favorite Batman, isn't he?
Yeah, Keaton is my favorite Batman. I do love... Now, Bale is in my favorite Batman movies, right? But Keaton is my favorite Batman.
So how do you feel about him coming back?
I mean, one of the general concept... First of all, before I get into it, can you tell the story? Can you tell our Andy story?
Yeah,
because I feel like that sets the moment.
All right, so we're in London for the Birds of Prey junket, and we were coming back from the roller skate party, right? Weren't we coming back from that?
Correct.
They set up a roller skate party for the Birds of Prey junket, and it was an open bar, and you could skate. And this is where, for people who follow me on the Snyder Cut story, this is where I met Jim Lee from DC and walked over to talk to him about the Snyder Cut. And we were coming back from that event and walking into our hotel. And that hotel that we stayed in London, we're normally very, very lucky to stay in some of the most beautiful hotels on Earth, like places you would never dream of being able to go into. And we wouldn't if studios didn't allow us to go there. And this one in London was over the top luxurious, and to the point that as we were going in, because later, was it on that same trip that you saw Robert Pattinson?
Yeah, I ran into Pattinson coming back from shooting the Batman.
Who was shooting the Batman. And
did you have a good time running into him?
It was
around Twilight.
Around Twilight? Yeah, good call. We saw Andy Muschietti, and Muschietti has come by the CinemaBlend interview suite at San Diego Comic-Con 2 years in a row for It. First for the first It, and then for It Chapter 2. So I know him pretty well. I've interviewed him a couple of times. He's always been really nice. He's hung around the suite and talked to us a bunch. And he was outside of the hotel that we were heading back to, catching a cigarette really fast. And we did that thing where you lock eyes with somebody and you're like, I know you. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's Andy Muschietti. And he says, yeah, I'm in town. I'm
and it
working.
Was just us. Like it was great because like we weren't surrounded by like, I almost would argue if we were like in a group of like 10 junket people, I just would have like said, okay, let's just keep going. But it was just you and me.
Yeah. So we stopped and talked to him for a bit. Yeah. And he said, oh yeah, I'm here working on the script for The Flash. And he mentioned Christina Hodgson, I think it is, a girl who wrote Bumblebee. I think she's working on that with him. And so she was in London also. And I said, oh, that's right. You're doing Flash and it's going to be a Flashpoint story. And he was, not giving up very many details. And I said, look, hey, are you going to bring back Jeffrey Dean Morgan? Because the whole knock on Flashpoint, or the story of Flashpoint, is when Flash goes back and resets the timeline by saving his parents from getting killed. When he returns to the alternate universe, he's in a new timeline where the Batman parents getting murdered in the alley scene is changed in that Bruce dies, the kid dies, and Bruce's parents go on to become the father. Thomas Wayne becomes Batman, and the mother. That's cool. The mother goes insane. Martha Wayne goes insane from seeing her kid murdered in the alley, and she becomes the Joker. And that's how it plays out in the Flashpoint story.
I've never heard this. This is
dude, it's nuts.
What a cool concept.
Nuts.
Yeah.
So Thomas Wayne, it's also a great way for DC to, like, I don't want to say fix, but like fix any story issues they have right now.
Sure.
That's awesome.
You got to assume, like, if you want to look at what Zach did in casting those two parents, he puts Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen from The Walking Dead in, parts that have no dialogue at all. They're on screen for half a minute, essentially,
lots
just
of
to get killed.
Flying,
a ton of pearls. But why would you cast them unless you wanted to maybe potentially use them later in a Flashpoint movie? So the audience was, this fan base is pretty excited about the potential of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who also worked with Zach on Watchmen, obviously played the comedian. And I mentioned to Andy, I was like, well, you're going to bring him back to play Thomas Wayne. And Andy kind of smiled at us and he said, actually, we have a different idea for that, but didn't want to tell me what it was. And I was like, okay, cool, man. I'm not going to press you. I'm not trying to get any kind of scoops out of you. This was just a cool sort of run-in type thing. And now here this story breaks that they want to bring Keaton back for it. And but it's not, that wouldn't be a traditional Flashpoint story, because I don't think, like, he's not going to play Thomas Wayne. It's just going to set up a multiverse where Flash somehow has to interact with '89 Batman.
Because keep in mind, he's already met TV's The Flash.
He did, yes. Yeah. On the television show last year, they did a multiverse thing. So
so they've kind of already started laying the groundwork. I don't know. I think that is such a brilliant idea because I've been reading that like it's going to be less. Not saying that Keaton's not going to suit up, because why would you bring him back if he's not going to suit up at all?
Sure.
But less of like a Batman role and more of like kind of the Nick Fury of the DCU, which I think is such a brilliant idea. I think Keaton is so fantastic in that role. He seems to have really owned it over the last like 3 decades. He seems like he's not one of those guys that like hates it and doesn't want to talk about it. Like he seems like you can just tell in interviews when someone asks about it, like he's still jacked about it. I would argue that I think Batman, like outside of the Nolan trilogy, I think Batman Returns is probably the best Batman movie. I think, I just think it's brilliant. Also, then again, if those movies are canon, does that mean that Pfeiffer could come back as Catwoman?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think, because the Penguin died, right? Joker died, Penguin died. Yeah. And then Max Schreck died.
Yeah.
But I would love to see Pfeiffer come back. But I think Selena Kyle lives.
She also looks exactly like she did.
She looks the exact same.
Too, yeah.
And I actually think maybe this is a hot take, she deserved an Oscar nomination as Catwoman. She was
interesting,
brilliant. I thought she was brilliant. I thought Danny DeVito was brilliant.
I want to throw it to Kevin really quick for a cautious take on this, because here we are bringing back a hero of ours who is playing a role that made him famous, or one of the ones that made him famous. Michael Keaton would have been famous regardless. Kevin has watched Arnold Schwarzenegger return to the Terminator franchise.
Ooh, great point. Great point.
A lot. So does that give you any pause, Kev?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think the only difference between Arnold and Keaton is that the character of Batman has been played by different people throughout the time since he left the character. So like, it's almost like it's a homecoming versus like, I don't know, Arnold returning to Terminator felt like a cash grab. But because there have been other Batman movies, and Keaton returning just feels more like a homecoming and more of like a warm blanket, right, to the universe of Batman. For me, it's interesting. I always find Batman discussions very interesting because you always have to preface what you want to say about your Batmans. Like people will say like my favorite Batman, best Batman. And I've always found it interesting because I think Keaton, there's like 3 or 4 ways you can look at it. Keaton is like an incredible Batman and Bruce Wayne, as was Affleck. Affleck was a great Batman and a great Bruce Wayne. I don't love Bale's Batman because of the voice primarily, but I do think his Bruce Wayne was the best Bruce Wayne ever put to camera. But Keaton kind of has that flow where he's perfect at both. They're 2 different characters. I mean, you got to play them differently. Batman and Bruce Wayne are almost 2 completely different characters, almost more so than Clark Kent and Superman. I find the divide between them not as heavy as the divide between Batman and Bruce Wayne. I find that to be a different divide personally.
I love whenever Bale played Bruce Wayne, he was such a jerk. You know, he was such a spoiled rich kid, right? In all of the scenes where he showed up, like purposely, you know, like falling into the fountain in the restaurant with the girls and all that stuff.
Walking into a room, he always had like 3 or 4 girls. Like when, like he probably genuinely couldn't have cared less because all he did was love Rachel. Rachel.
I'm interested in Keaton returning only because he is. I mean, I still feel like Affleck is to this date my favorite Batman to ever grace the screen. I still think the warehouse scene and the nightmare sequence are the best versions of Batman. But I also love that Frank Miller-esque, very dark Batman storylines. Right. I think that Miller, so that's probably why I'm attracted to that. I also I discovered Frank Miller when I saw Sin City for the first time. I was not a comic book reader growing up. I had certain comics, but I never had Sin City. So when I developed his style watching Sin City, then when I saw what Snyder did with Affleck in BVS, it just kind of like melted these 2 worlds together that I absolutely loved. And I think to this day, my favorite shot of Batman ever is the shot in BVS. I think, is it the scene where Batman's like over that edge and it's like the look up shot with the rain coming down and the lights on
that's a cool shot.
On the gargoyle?
It's so Frank Miller.
I know, yeah.
It's so Frank Miller. Like, I just love that moment. So I know I'm deterring from your question, but in regards to Keaton returning, I think it's a different situation than Arnold returning to Terminator. I think I'm actually more excited about it. I was excited about Arnold returning to Terminator 2 or 3 or 4 times until I saw the movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because to your point, I think like Schwarzenegger returning almost felt like, well, I've made a few other movies and they haven't done well, so like let me go back to the well and give people what I know, as opposed to like Keaton has done just fine outside. Like he doesn't need to return to Batman. So the fact that like they must have presented, because remember, like they wanted him back for Batman 3, for Batman Forever, and he didn't like the direction Schumacher was going to take it. And so like clearly like he knows to turn down Batman when it's not good. So I'm thinking they must have presented him with something awesome.
I have a question for you guys. If this sort of Flashpoint scenario, if Keaton's role is like bigger than just like a 30-second cameo as he runs through time or whatever, does this open up the possibility if they're going to sort of embrace that multiverse of Pattinson's Batman becoming the new Justice League Batman, like of just tying those worlds together so that we can logically not have to worry about Ben Affleck?
It's interesting. I mean,
does it solve that problem?
My mind hurts.
It could, yes, it could solve that problem. But I really think Matt Reeves just wants his films to be separate from all that. And it would be confusing for Warner Brothers to have an existing universe going on, but then have one of your main characters of that universe doing his own trilogy someplace else. I don't know, it's weird. It's weird because it's almost like they wanted to set up the shared universe similar to what the MCU had. Then they kind of decided to pull it apart and let everybody do their own thing. So Gal Gadot is able to do different Wonder Woman movies. Jason Momoa is able to do. And now it seems like they're inching back toward putting it back together somehow, because Ray Fisher potentially is going to show up in the Flash movie as Cyborg. And, you know, I don't know any other ties that they're potentially going to be doing. I don't know. That's a really great question. I like also, too, that, you know, they set up the potential of doing a Batman Beyond, which is a very popular animated series where Bruce Wayne was older and retired and mentored Terry McGinnis, who became the second Batman in a more high-tech suit. And yes, they could go that direction, too. I think Warner Brothers' biggest fear is that they overpromise things. You know, they just keep saying, oh, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and then they should just let it play out first. Like, let us breathe about the fact that you're bringing Keaton back. That's cool. Let us enjoy that.
I feel like Keaton kind of already returned as Batman a little bit in Birdman. A little bit. We got to kind of see him play with that vibe again. You know what I mean? It was kind of a cool, and again, with his current age, which is obviously older than he was when he played Batman, to see him back in a suit like that it still worked. Like, I mean, it's weird. I always wanted to ask Iñárritu González about that aspect and whether or not he was concerned about people making that connection. Like, was it too close to Batman? Because it was like, and I wondered, but I almost feel like, do you feel like he was definitely nodding towards Batman in the sense of like,
well, that's why someone pointed out the fact that like he does Birdman. The whole message of that is like franchises are bad and these characters weigh down on you. And since then, Keaton has done Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah,
he was in Dumbo. Was he in that RoboCop?
Yeah.
Oh God. He was in Spider-Man Homecoming. He did the Dumbo remake. He's going to be in Morbius. He showed up at the end credits of Morbius. So, yeah.
So, do you think right now Marvel is looking at all of their Spider-Man going
yeah, okay. So, can we talk about that?
Do we do this?
Remember
I asked Tom Holland about it in London, and he was like very much like, yes, I want to do this.
I think that they were going to do that.
Is it
blasphemous? And you think DC beat him to it?
Yeah.
Is it blasphemous to say that I think the greatest scene Keaton's ever been involved in is the Homecoming limo scene?
That's a great scene.
No, I mean, it's an amazing scene. He's been in some tremendous scenes, though.
What's a better scene than Keaton's been in besides that scene?
Let's get nuts.
From performance, like a performance-wise scene?
What a scene.
Because that one is great. God, I even just would throw it back because I watched it again recently. It's one of the ones that I watch over and over again. Is when Spider-Man shows up in the warehouse after that. And and he's like, you know, hey, I found you. And he's like, oh, hey, Pete, you know, I can see what Liz sees in you now. You know, like, you really do have that stick-to-itiveness. And then he's like, why are you essentially saying to Spider-Man, he's like, well, how do you think Tony Stark, you know, got all of his millions? You know, he's just as bad as the rest of us are. And then they look down at us. You know, we're the ones who are supposed to eat their table scraps.
Movie ever.
It's a tremendous performance by him.
Keaton's performance in that movie is so understated, and like I feel like people don't give it enough credit because it's in this big spectacle. Like that performance, that is the grounded element of that entire film. He grounds it in this like really nasty like villain way that feels realistic. You know, it's very strange.
Because as much as I liked Gyllenhaal as Mysterio, he was a little over the top. He did a little bit of the mustache twirling, especially when he played whatever director he was playing. Which,
I loved that. I liked that movie better than Homecoming.
Oh, I think Far From Home's great, but I give Homecoming the edge just slightly.